January the 6th. Was it an act of terror, an insurrection, or were they brave patriots pursuing justice in a corrupt system? Or are both parties using this event to create more power and close down personal freedoms? Let's discuss it. Hello there, you 4.7 million wonders. Continue on the path, be brave, stay awake. Don't let them divide you, don't let them diminish you. Let's stay present, let's stay free. Let's have a look at this story. Now, some people watching this will think that January the 6th was an example of people getting together to stand up for their rights. Other people watching this will say that it's the worst insurrection that ever happened. Let's have a look at some of the reporting around this subject and see if we can get some kind of transparency, some kind of clarity around this matter. The Capital Riot has frequently been compared to the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks by media commentators and government officials and even former President George W. Bush. On the one hand, the comparison is absurd. While nearly 3,000 people were killed by terrorists 21 years ago, only 5 died in last year's Capitol siege, 4 of them the rioters themselves, the attackers in the analogy, and 1 officer who died of a stroke after the event. However, the two events do have some stark parallels. Each was an avoidable security failure, received a mountain of fear-inducing media coverage, and has since been used to justify further centralisation of repressive government powers. That's what's interesting to me. As you know, when it comes to political tribalism, the tribe I belong to is the tribe of personal and collective freedom, beyond divisionism, that we have more in common with one another than we'll ever have with the elites that govern us, and we have to find ways of coming together and overcoming our prejudices and biases to create new spaces, new systems, new communication. The response to the events of January 6 has been marked by a crackdown on dissent, a dramatic increase in anti-protest bills around the country, including at least 88 that have been introduced since the Capital Riot, a massive build-up of the Capitol Police into a national force to target terrorism, as well as the rollout by the Biden administration of a sweeping domestic counter-terror strategy. The vilification of people that have a different political perspective from you might seem enjoyable when you agree with it, but if it is used in order to bring about legislation that further empowers people in positions of authority, they will use that power however they see fit. And eventually it will not be to your convenience, because in the end, you know, don't you, that the government operates in order to service the interests of powerful corporations supported by the media. So there might be a bit where you get the rush of, yeah, I don't like those people either, I think they're idiots. You know, whether you're a person that's in the BLM camp or in wherever you stand on social justice issues, or whether you're a Trump supporter, it doesn't actually really matter. There's a centralized authority that doesn't care about your stuff. Your stuff's irrelevant to them. They don't care about your flag. They operate at a level of global power that is beyond the reach of such trivial, petty alliances. While establishment Democrats and commentators called for the many non-violent January 6 participants to be harshly prosecuted, even charged with felony murder, some judges and prosecutors opted for leniency, acknowledging that the actions of many of the individual rioters often boiled down to trespassing, as Politico reported. Even FBI Director Christopher Wray noted that peaceful protesters and those who got swept up for committing low-level trespassing were the vast majority of the participants. Of course, you see similar reporting around BLM. Some people say, hold on a minute, look, all these shops are getting burnt down. Other people saying largely peaceful protesters. So, of course, what you have to have is a lens and rubric that does not alter dependent on the issue you're discussing. Obviously, we have a lot of strong feelings about the nature of the protest and the substantive message behind it, but the act of going to protest at the Capitol building, people demanding to get into the Capitol building, I think it's something that people on the left should be able to relate to and identify with, says James Clark, a civil rights lawyer based in Austin, Texas. Especially after the George Floyd uprising, we should be extremely concerned about any expansion or legitimization of the federal government in cracking down and going after protest activity. In a way, wouldn't it be beautiful if the people from the Capitol January 6 insurrection or disturbance or whatever you want to call it, and the people that are involved in the BLM movement could go, so, right, one thing we're totally agreed with is that the machinery of power is not working in the interests of people. Now, instead of focusing on our differences, like that, you know, our focus is around these aspects of identity and your focus is on this aspect of economics, why don't we agree that what we want is a different system and come together and forget about this triviality, because even though there are aspects of it are super important, it's not as important as the entrenched, immovable, corrupt systems of power that love it that we're spending all our time quarrelling and quibbling over this, and in fact use it to introduce further legislation to prevent our feelings ever being represented at a democratic level. So let's do the work to get there. The days and weeks and months after January 6 should have prompted some difficult questions. What created the profound mistrust of political institutions that undergirded it? What was the role of corporate power in what happened? And how could it be curbed? Instead, a prosecutorial push combined with relentless and often error-laden media coverage of the events fed into an accelerating narrative about growing disorder and lawlessness, which Republicans seized on to advance an authoritarian agenda against the left. Alluding to Capital Riot authorities in Florida, prosecuted anarchist and Black Lives Matter protester Daniel Baker purely over speech and social media posts, sentencing him to nearly 3 years in prison. So this dude that's on the other side, inverted commas, of the political spectrum was prosecuted using legislation that was there to condemn people that he rather no doubt would think, oh, I hate those dudes, but really you're no different. It's like sport, really. You think that, I hate that football team. You just people to support football teams. But they're wearing a blue top. And that's what politics is to them. It's a game. And I draw your attention to the fact that Republican and Democrat Congress members in roughly equal proportions are profiting from insider stock trading information and will only support bills coming in that have loopholes so they can continue doing it. They've obviously got more in common with one another, working in the same building to the same end, having gone to the same schools, and lobbied by the same companies than they do with you and your apparent adherence to ideologies around whatever social movement floats your boat. And I recognise the importance of all those social movements. In Florida, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis invoked the Capitol Riot to reintroduce and pass into law a repressive anti-protest bill that had previously failed. In a video promoting the bill, his party placed footage of the Capitol breach side by side with that of George Floyd protesters, making the case that such out-of-control protesters needed to be subdued. So the issue doesn't matter. While you might see George Floyd and the Capitol riots as distinct issues, that Republican lawmaker put them side by side and used them to pursue his own agenda of creating and generating and instantiating more anti-protest law. It's no different to them. 88 such anti-protest bills have been introduced around the country since the Capitol Riot, according to the International Centre for Not-for-Profit Law. Does that have to exist, the not-for-profit law? That should be all law. This law, though, isn't even for profit. Oh, thanks. 33 of those bills were introduced in January 2021 alone, with several, such as Florida's bill, coming within days immediately after January 6, and another 32 introduced in February. 11 of these post-January 6 laws have so far been enacted, giving authorities wide latitude to prohibit or punish protesters. So whatever you think about that event, whether you think, oh, I hated those guys, those hicks, or I love those guys, those freedom fighters, the consequences of it are anti-protest legislation. So if you think there might ever be something you don't agree with happening as a result of your government, their relationship with the media and big business, then you should be concerned. And if there are other people that are up for getting out on the street and protesting, you should be looking for alliances, not differences with those people. Republicans have often pointed to the protests of the summer of 2020 to justify this authoritarian crackdown, but lawmakers in Connecticut, Georgia, Indiana and Oklahoma, as well as Florida, have all cited January 6 to justify these repressive measures. More broadly, the themes officials have drawn on to sell these bills, widespread property damage, violence, disrespect and danger towards police officers, have echoed the themes of media coverage that prevailed in the weeks and months after the Capitol riot. The only way I can understand this is in terms of sport. Like, I watch a team against my team do a foul. Oh, you animal. My team does a foul. Oh, well done though. Good. You're playing. It's a game that we're trying to win. We can't afford to have the kind of tribal dumbness that sport allows us in politics. Because they don't have integrity, we have to have integrity. Because they don't have authenticity, we have to have authenticity. Because they lack transparency, we need it in high doses. Otherwise, the landscape is governed by edicts that benefit them, plainly, evidently, used to create legislation that enhances their power. The event's clearest legacy is the expansion of the Capitol Police into a national anti-terrorism force that operates largely free of public accountability. That's what the world needs in the wake of recent events, a force that does not have to operate under public accountability. Democrat Representative Benny Thompson, chairman of the House Select Committee investigating January 6, has said the committee will recommend new intelligence gathering legislation. Wow. More opportunities for the government to spy on ordinary people, legitimised by the accusation of terrorism. Just as many rank-and-file Democrats are becoming increasingly supportive of government surveillance and institutions like the CIA and FBI. Another example, you remember, the CIA, FBI, they're the baddies. We're in power now. I like them. I like the CIA and FBI. They're good. They're necessary. They're servants of America. The Biden administration has also increased information sharing between different authorities and released a domestic counter-terror strategy that would target what it calls domestic violent extremists who are motivated by a range of ideologies, listing environmentalists. Oh, boo. I mean, hooray. Anti-capitalists. Boo. I mean, hooray. And animal rights activists, among others. Such language mirrors the rhetoric used by law enforcement officials and members of Congress in counter-terrorism hearings after the event who paired January 6 with George Floyd protesters, or anarchist violent extremists, as proof of a rising terrorist threat, stressing that extremists who committed crimes across the political spectrum need to be targeted while advocating a new domestic terrorism law. According to data from the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, as of February 2021, domestic terrorism cases were on track to beat the record 183 cases recording in 2020, with 54 filed in Washington, D.C. after January the 6th. In September 2021, FBI Director Wray testified that the Bureau's domestic terrorism caseload had more than doubled since 2020, as have the number of personnel working in the area. So essentially, more power, more authority, more laws, more cases, more benefit to the powerful. So this is a clear demonstration that any differences that we feel we might have with other people have to be put aside in order to create systems that are broadly more fair. You'll notice over the course of this report that we're saying the word Democrat and the word Republican in roughly equal measure, almost as if they're the same basic thing with the same basic intention, and to get caught up on the trivial differences would be akin to caring about the colour of someone's hat while your house is burning down. Recent history shows what such repression could look like. In the wake of the 9/11 attacks, federal authorities routinely used the expansive new anti-terrorism powers passed under Republican President George W. Bush to target progressive activists, dissidents, immigrants, and Muslims. The breach of the Capitol happened in large part because law enforcement was asleep at the wheel, if not willingly negligent, not for a lack of repressive government powers. Enacting such laws won't solve the underlying structural issues that helped lead to the Capital Riot happening, or the economic dislocation that clearly fed into its participants' delusions. In a sense, the solutions that are sought are always the repression of the symptoms of dissatisfaction rather than the problem itself. Generating more power, more legislation, more ability to repress ordinary people, more ability to control protest will not solve the problems that America is experiencing. It will just mean that we can stamp out the fires that people are starting because of their dissatisfaction, no matter what political ideology they believe they are doing it in support of.
You never use words carelessly.
Ted Cruz is a pretty fascinating character with regard to this issue, because on a Comedy Central montage, I see a bit of footage of him standing up in front of a crowd saying, "Let's go get them." And now Tucker Carlson is dragging him over the coals for calling those people terrorists. Let's have a look.
I mean, there are a lot of dumb people in the Congress. You're not one of them. I think you're smarter than I am.
Good skills from Tucker. Setting Ted Cruz up nicely there with a compliment.
And yet you called this a terror attack when by no definition was it a terror attack. That's a lie. You told that lie on purpose, and I'm wondering why you did.
Well, Tucker, thank you for having me on.
Well, Tucker, Jesus, don't kill me.
When you aired your episode last night, I sent you a text shortly thereafter.
I sent you a text, remember, and then I leaned over and put my hand on your thigh and thanked you.
And said, listen, I'd like to go on because the way I phrased things yesterday, it was sloppy and it was frankly dumb. And
I don't buy that. Whoa. I don't buy that.
But he's stopping him in the middle of his apology. I don't buy that. I don't like that apology. Where's the power in this situation? It's with Tucker, huh?
Look, I've known you a long time, since before you went to the Senate. You were a Supreme Court contender. You take words as seriously as any man who's ever served in the Senate. And every word you repeated that phrase. I do not believe that you used that accidentally. I just don't.
Just don't. Go on. Ted Cruz had to text and ask to come on the TV and experience this.
So, Tucker, as a result of my sloppy phrasing, it's caused a lot of people to misunderstand what I meant. Let me tell you what I meant to say.
Firstly, I love you, and I'm sorry. Secondly, is this good enough?
What I was referring to are the limited number of people who engaged in violent attacks against police officers. Now, I think you and I both agree that if you assault a police officer, you should go to jail. A lot of people have misunderstood that comment.
Wait a second, but wait, but hold on. What you just said doesn't make sense. So if somebody assaults a cop, he should be charged and go to jail. I couldn't agree more. We have said that for years. But that person's still not a terrorist. How many people have been charged with terrorism on January 6th? Like, why'd you use that word?
Why'd you say that? Even if you hit a cop, don't say the word terrorist. Tucker Carlson doesn't need to run for president. He already is.
So why'd you do it?
So Tucker, let me answer you directly. The reason I use that word for a decade, I have referred to people who violently assault police officers.
It's just my special word. My special word for someone who violently assaults a police officer is terrorist. And it's another thing. I like to call my Winky little tiger boy. Now, if you heard me say that, maybe you'll think I was strange. But that's just me. My special words I use. Ted Cruz, interesting, because when it was convenient to get people all riled up to facilitate and encourage the protest or insurrection, or however you see it, that took place on January the 6th, he done that. Now it's convenient to call them terrorism in order to facilitate more legislation being brought in that can repress protest. He'll call them that. So next week there might be a new word that they call them.
I've done so over and over and over again. If you look at all the assaults we've seen across the country, I've called that terrorism over and over again.
Wait. I also like Tucker Carlson's general. Like, no, it's like he's sort of rubbing something off of a whiteboard. Like, no, that's not good, Ted Cruz.
Can I just ask, hold on, you work in the I guess I just don't believe you.
This interview will have to end with Ted Cruz polishing, at very least, Tucker Carlson's shoes and possibly his reproductive organs. That's where the power lies in this situation. More importantly and more significantly, there are no significant differences between us, no matter what we may feel, no matter where our emotions may lead us. Rationally, we have to look at what we share, what we have in common, what kind of legislation we want introduced, what ability to protest and be active in the decisions that control and govern our lives. Our duty is to look for alliances, particularly with people that we would usually see ourselves as opposed to. This is a journey we must undertake if we don't want to live in a highly regulated, legislated, increasingly penitentiary environment. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Do you think politicians use events to create legislation that advances them, regardless of whether they're Democrats or Republicans? Do you think some types of violence are okay and others aren't? Do you think some kind of protests are okay and others aren't? What kind of world do you want to live in? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what mistakes you think I've made. Let me know what you think of Tucker. Let me know what you think of Ted Cruz. Let me know what you think about January the 6th. Let me know what you think we should do now. Tell me what stories you want to see covered and how you want to see them covered. This is the only way we're going to evolve and grow together, is through dialogue, open, transparent dialogue. If you enjoyed this video, have a little look at this one. Have a look over at my spiritual channel. Subscribe to this channel and subscribe to the spiritual side channel as well, so you can get information about how to keep yourself together. Sign up to my mailing list too, so I can tell you what I'm up to. Like, for example, I'm live in the UK between January and May, appearing all over the country. Stay free.